Marcus Chen had seen enough war to last 3 lifetimes. The scars on his arms told stories of plasma burns from the Kepler campaign, while the slight limp in his left leg reminded him daily of the asteroid mining station siege on Europa. 25 years of service in the Human Defense Corps had earned him medals, respect, and a pension that barely covered his monthly rent in the cramped apartment blocks of New Geneva. The summons came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier drone that nearly took his head off as he watered the single dying plant on his fire escape. The message was written in perfect standard Galactic, which immediately raised red flags. Nobody used formal Galactic script for everyday correspondence. The golden seal at the bottom made his blood run cold. It belonged to King Zephyros VII, ruler of the Andromeda Coalition and arguably the most powerful being in known space. Marcus read the message 3 times before its meaning sank in. He was being summoned to the royal court on Nexus Prime for what the document called recognition of extraordinary service to galactic peace. The transport would arrive in 6 hours. Refusal was not mentioned as an option. 6 hours later, Marcus stood in his dress uniform, the only formal clothing he owned that still fit, watching a sleek diplomatic vessel touch down on the building's rooftop. The ship was beautiful in the way that only alien technology could be, its hull seeming to bend light around itself like liquid mercury. A tall, blue-skinned Alteran in flowing robes emerged and bowed formally. "Sergeant Marcus Chen, retired," the alien said in accented but perfect English. "I am Ambassador Keltar. The king awaits your presence." The journey to Nexus Prime took 18 hours through hyperspace, but Marcus barely noticed the time passing. The ship's interior was more luxurious than anything he had ever experienced. Real wood panels lined the walls, and the viewport showed him star systems he had only read about in tactical reports. Ambassador Keltar proved to be excellent company, sharing stories of various worlds and their customs while carefully avoiding any mention of why Marcus had been summoned. Nexus Prime defied description. The planet served as the galactic capital, home to representatives from over 2,000 species. Towering spires of crystalline architecture stretched into the purple-tinged atmosphere, connected by bridges that seemed to float without any visible support. Ships of every conceivable design filled the sky like a 3-dimensional traffic pattern that somehow never resulted in collisions. The royal palace occupied an entire continent, its walls carved from a single massive diamond that had been hollowed out over centuries. Marcus felt increasingly out of place as they passed through halls filled with dignitaries whose species he couldn't begin to identify. Some floated, others scuttled, and a few seemed to exist as pure energy contained within specialized suits. King Zephyros VII stood 12 feet tall, his form humanoid but clearly not human. His skin held the deep purple hue of his species, the Corvani, and his 4 arms moved with fluid grace as he gestured. Crown-like bone structures grew naturally from his skull, giving him an appearance both regal and slightly intimidating. Despite his imposing presence, his voice carried warmth when he spoke. "Sergeant Chen," the king said, his words translated instantly by the universal communicators embedded in the throne room's walls. "Please approach." Marcus walked forward, his military training keeping his back straight despite the awe threatening to overwhelm him. He had faced alien warlords in combat, but this was different. This being commanded the loyalty of trillions of sentients across hundreds of galaxies. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, offering a crisp military salute. King Zephyros smiled, an expression that looked slightly unsettling on his alien features, but was clearly meant to be reassuring. "There is no need for such formality, my friend. You are here because of a debt that cannot be repaid with mere words or wealth." The king gestured to a massive holographic display that materialized in the air between them. It showed a star system Marcus recognized, the Kepler system, where some of the war's bloodiest battles had taken place. The display zoomed in to show a particular planet, its surface scarred by orbital bombardments. Kepler 442b, the king continued. The hegemony's last stronghold in that sector. According to our records, your unit was tasked with evacuating a research station on the planet's surface while enemy forces closed in. The station contained not just human civilians, but also members of 17 different species working on critical agricultural research. Marcus remembered that mission all too well. It had been a nightmare from start to finish. The research station sat in a valley surrounded by mountains, accessible only through a narrow pass that the enemy had already begun to shell. His unit had been ordered to extract as many people as possible before the station's destruction became inevitable. The tactical reports show that you had received orders to prioritize human evacuees, the king said, his 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. Standard military protocol in such situations. Your superiors expected you to save perhaps 60 humans and leave the rest. The holographic display showed Marcus his own unit moving through the station, carrying wounded and guiding groups of civilians toward the evacuation shuttles. He could see himself in the recording, younger and without the gray that now touched his temples, shouting orders while plasma bolts struck the ground around him. Instead, the king continued, you chose to make 17 trips into that hell. You and your team saved every single person in that facility. 437 lives, representing species from across the galaxy. Many of them were individuals whose research would later prove crucial in developing the agricultural techniques that ended the famine on 6 different worlds. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. We couldn't just leave them, Your Majesty. They were civilians, researchers. They had families. Yes, the king said, and now his smile seemed genuinely warm. This is why you are here. Not because you followed orders, but because you chose compassion over protocol. Because you demonstrated what the best of humanity represents. The king rose from his throne and walked down the steps toward Marcus. Each step seemed deliberate, ceremonial. In my culture, such actions create what we call a soul debt. It cannot be repaid with money or territory or political favors. It can only be honored through a gift that comes from the heart. Marcus waited, unsure how to respond. In his experience, gifts from powerful political figures usually came with strings attached. The king seemed to sense his hesitation. I have studied your file extensively, Sergeant Chen. You live alone. You have no family, few friends. The wars took much from you, including your sense of purpose. You save others, but you have never learned how to save yourself from the loneliness that eats at your spirit. The observation hit closer to home than Marcus cared to admit. His apartment was silent, except for the hum of air recyclers. He spoke to his neighbors only when absolutely necessary. Most nights he fell asleep to the sound of old war documentaries because the silence made his thoughts too loud. Therefore, the king announced, I am giving you a companion, one chosen specifically for you, who will bring purpose back to your life while providing the friendship you have been denied. A side door opened, and Marcus turned to see a figure approaching. His first impression was of size. The being stood nearly as tall as Marcus himself, which was unusual among the alien species he knew. As it came closer, he could make out more details. The figure was clearly feminine, covered in what appeared to be silver and white fur that caught the light beautifully. Her movement was graceful, predatory in the way of natural hunters. When she raised her head to look at him, Marcus found himself staring into intelligent yellow eyes set in an unmistakably wolf-like face. This is Lyra of the Fenrigan people, the king said. She has volunteered to serve as your companion and guide. Lyra approached Marcus directly, showing no deference to the king or the grandeur of the throne room. When she spoke, her voice was clear and confident, though her accent was unlike anything Marcus had heard before. "Hello, Marcus Chen," she said. "I have been looking forward to meeting the human who thinks that following his conscience is more important than following orders." Marcus extended his hand automatically, the way he would greet any new acquaintance. Lyra looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, then laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Your species and mine greet differently," she said, "but I appreciate the gesture." Instead of shaking his hand, she placed her clawed fingers against his palm briefly, then stepped back. "I hope you will not mind having a talking wolf as a housemate." What exactly does being a companion mean?" Marcus asked, looking between Lyra and the king. "It means I go where you go," Lyra replied before the king could answer. "It means I am your friend, your advisor when you need one, and your protector when danger threatens. In return, you provide me with purpose and the chance to learn about humanity from one of its finest examples." The king nodded approvingly. "Lyra's people are among the most loyal in the galaxy. They form bonds that last lifetimes. She has chosen to offer this bond to you, Marcus Chen, because she believes in what you represent." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "Your Majesty, this is incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for such an honor. I'm just a retired soldier trying to figure out what to do with the rest of his life." "Exactly," Lyra interjected, "which makes you perfect for someone like me who is also trying to figure out her place in the universe." The king returned to his throne, his expression pleased. "The decision is made. Lyra has already transferred her belongings to your dwelling on Earth. The two of you will return together, and I trust that this partnership will prove beneficial to both of your peoples." As if summoned by the king's words, Ambassador Keltar appeared at Marcus's side. "The return transport is prepared, Sergeant Chen. Whenever you are ready to depart." Marcus looked at Lyra, who was watching him with those unsettling yellow eyes. There was intelligence there, and something else. Hope, maybe, or curiosity. "I guess we should talk on the way back to Earth," he said. "Indeed we should," Lyra agreed. "I have many questions about human customs, and I suspect you have just as many about mine." The journey back to Earth began in awkward silence. Marcus sat in the transport's main cabin, still processing everything that had happened. Lyra had settled herself on the deck nearby, her posture somehow both relaxed and alert. She seemed larger in the confined space of the ship, and Marcus found himself acutely aware of her presence. "You are uncomfortable," Lyra observed after several minutes. "Not uncomfortable," Marcus replied, then reconsidered. "Well, maybe a little. I've never had a roommate before, let alone one from another species." "I understand your hesitation. My people do not form bonds lightly either. But the king spoke truthfully when he said I volunteered for this role. I requested specifically to be paired with you." "Why?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the viewport where stars streaked past in hyperspace. "Because you did something on Kepler 442b that my people would have done. You chose to save everyone, even when it would have been easier to save only your own kind. That choice tells me something important about your character." "It wasn't a choice," Marcus said. "Not really. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd left those people behind." "Exactly," Lyra said, turning to look at him directly. "You acted according to your nature, not your training. That is the mark of someone worth knowing." Marcus felt heat in his cheeks again. Compliments made him uncomfortable, especially ones that suggested he was somehow special. "What about you? What's your story?" Lyra's ears flicked back slightly, a gesture Marcus was beginning to recognize as thoughtful rather than aggressive. "I am what my people call a seeker. It means I was born with a need to understand things beyond my own world and culture. Most Fenrigans are content to live within our traditional territories, but a few of us feel called to explore and learn. The king's offer to serve as a companion to a worthy being from another species was exactly what I had been hoping for. And you picked me based on a military report? I picked you based on 17 separate acts of courage and selflessness, Lyra corrected. The king showed me everything, Marcus. Not just the rescue on Kepler 442b, but all of it. The time you carried a wounded Corvan soldier 2 kilometers through enemy territory on Rigel 7. The way you shared your rations with civilian refugees on the food transport to Vega Station, the medical supplies you bought with your own money to treat sick children on Proxima Colony. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Those incidents had seemed natural at the time, just doing what needed to be done. Having them recounted like heroic deeds made him squirm. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I just tried to help people when I could." "And that," Lyra said with satisfaction, "is exactly why you are the right person for me to learn from." The first week of living with Lyra proved to be an education in interspecies diplomacy. Marcus's small apartment, which had felt cramped when he lived alone, now seemed impossibly tiny with a 7-foot-tall wolf-like being sharing the space. Lyra had adapted as well as could be expected, though her sleeping arrangements had required some creativity. She preferred to sleep on the floor rather than the couch, claiming that soft furniture made her feel vulnerable. "Your dwelling is very contained," Lyra observed on their third morning together, carefully maneuvering around the kitchenette without knocking over any of Marcus's sparse furnishings. "It's called affordable housing," Marcus replied, making coffee in the single cup maker that was all his kitchen could accommodate. "Not everyone gets to live in palaces." Lyra's ears perked up with interest. "You speak as if the king's palace represents normal Fenrigan housing. I assure you it does not. My family's den was carved into a hillside and shared by 12 relatives. Privacy was a luxury we rarely enjoyed." Marcus paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. He had been making assumptions about Lyra's background based on the circumstances of their meeting. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed you came from wealth." "No offense taken." "It is natural to make such assumptions when context is limited." Lyra settled herself in the small space between the couch and the window, her movements careful and precise. "Tell me about this neighborhood. What kind of humans live here?" Marcus looked out the window at the apartment complex across the street, its weathered concrete facade dotted with air conditioning units and small satellite dishes. "Working people, mostly. Some retirees like me. A few families with kids who can't afford the better districts." "And they do not know each other well?" "Not really. People keep to themselves here." Lyra's ears flicked back in what Marcus was learning to recognize as confusion or disapproval. "This seems lonely. On my world, communities are closely connected. Everyone knows their neighbors' names, their families, their troubles." "Different cultures," Marcus said with a shrug. "Humans value privacy." "Privacy, yes, but not isolation." Lyra rose and moved to the window, looking down at the courtyard where a few children were playing while their parents sat on benches nearby. "Those adults watch each other's children. That suggests community cooperation." Marcus joined her at the window, studying the scene below with new eyes. He had lived in this building for 3 years, but had never really observed the social dynamics playing out in the courtyard. Lyra was right. There was definitely cooperation happening, patterns of mutual support that he had been too isolated to notice. "You see things differently than I do," he admitted, "because I am looking for different things. My people are naturally social. Living alone would be considered a form of punishment on my world." Lyra turned to study Marcus's face. "Is this punishment for you? This isolation?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had been living alone for so long that he had stopped thinking of it as a choice. "I don't know. Maybe. After the war, being around people felt difficult. Too much noise, too many expectations. Ah, Lyra said, understanding evident in her voice. Battle fatigue. We have seen this in our own warriors. The spirit retreats inward to protect itself, but sometimes it retreats so far that it forgets how to come back out. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest at the simple, matter-of-fact way she described what his military therapists had called post-traumatic stress disorder. No judgment, no clinical terminology, just recognition of a common problem with a practical explanation. How do your people deal with it? He asked. Time, community, purpose, and companions who understand. Lyra's yellow eyes met his directly. Perhaps this is another reason the king chose to pair us. You need to remember how to be part of something larger than yourself. Before Marcus could respond, a sharp knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Through the peephole, Marcus could see Mrs. Patterson from down the hall, holding a covered dish and looking impatient. It's my neighbor, Marcus told Lyra. She's persistent. Then we should answer. Refusing visitors is considered rude in most cultures. Marcus opened the door to find Mrs. Patterson, already craning her neck to see past him into the apartment. She was a woman in her 70s with steel-gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Marcus, dear, she said, I heard you had company staying with you. I brought some of my famous casserole to welcome your guest. Before Marcus could explain that his guest was not exactly human, Mrs. Patterson had pushed past him into the apartment. Her reaction to seeing Lyra was everything Marcus had feared it would be, eyes widening, mouth opening in shock, the casserole dish slipping from her hands. Lyra moved with incredible speed, catching the dish before it could hit the floor. Thank you for bringing food to welcome me, she said in her careful, accented English. Sharing meals is a sign of respect in both our cultures. Mrs. Patterson stared at Lyra for a long moment, clearly trying to process what she was seeing. You're very tall, she finally managed. Yes, my people tend toward greater height than humans. I am Lyra. Marcus has been telling me about his neighbors, though he did not mention your kindness in bringing food to strangers. Oh, Mrs. Patterson said, blinking rapidly. Well, I suppose, would you like to try some? It's tuna casserole. Family recipe. I would be honored, Lyra replied, though Marcus caught the slight twitch of her nose that suggested her carnivorous instincts were not entirely enthusiastic about tuna casserole. What followed was perhaps the strangest coffee hour of Marcus's life. Mrs. Patterson, after her initial shock, proved to be intensely curious about Lyra's origins and customs. Lyra, in turn, answered questions with patient good humor while asking her own about human neighborhood dynamics. So you're from another planet? Mrs. Patterson asked, settling into Marcus's small couch with the air of someone prepared for a long conversation. Yes, though planet is not quite accurate. My people live on several worlds within the same system. We are, how would you say, nomadic by nature. Like wolves, Mrs. Patterson observed, then immediately looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, that might be rude to point out. Not rude at all. The comparison is accurate. My people evolved from pack hunters, and we retain many of those instincts. The need for family groups, loyalty to our chosen companions, territorial awareness. Marcus found himself fascinated by the conversation. He had been living next to Mrs. Patterson for 3 years and had exchanged perhaps 50 words with her total. Now she was holding an animated discussion about evolutionary biology with his alien companion. Marcus never told me he knew anyone from off-world, Mrs. Patterson said, shooting him a reproachful look. Marcus is modest about his accomplishments, Lyra replied. He does not like to discuss his heroic actions during the war. Heroic actions? Mrs. Patterson's eyes lit up with interest. Marcus, you never said anything about being a hero. Because I'm not one. Marcus said quickly. Lyra's people have different ideas about what constitutes heroism. Saving hundreds of lives while under enemy fire seems heroic by any standard, Lyra said mildly. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, clearly hungry for details. What happened? Where was this? Marcus felt trapped between his natural inclination to deflect attention and his growing realization that Lyra was right about the importance of community connections. Maybe sharing some of his story wouldn't be the end of the world. It was during the Kepler campaign, he said slowly. My unit was assigned to evacuate a research station before enemy forces could capture it. As Marcus reluctantly recounted the mission, he noticed Lyra watching him carefully. Not just listening to his words, but observing his body language, his tone, the way he minimized his own role in the events he described. When he finished, Mrs. Patterson was staring at him with something approaching awe. "And I thought you were just the quiet veteran who never caused any trouble," she said. "Marcus, dear, you should be proud of what you did." "I was just doing my job," Marcus replied automatically. "Your job was to save 60 people," Lyra corrected gently. "You chose to save 437. There is a difference." Mrs. Patterson stayed for another hour, peppering both of them with questions about galactic politics, alien cultures, and Marcus's military service. When she finally left, she insisted on taking Lyra's empty casserole dish to wash it properly. "She will return tomorrow with more food," Lyra predicted as soon as the door closed behind their visitor. "How can you tell?" "She marked you as part of her territory when she chose to visit today. Humans may not be pack animals in the traditional sense, but you still exhibit many of the same social patterns. She has decided you and I are under her protection now." Marcus laughed, surprising himself. "Mrs. Patterson as a pack leader, that's actually pretty accurate." Over the following days, Marcus began to see his building and neighborhood differently. Lyra's observations about human social dynamics proved remarkably astute. She pointed out the informal networks of mutual support, the territorial boundaries that neighbors respected, the subtle communication systems that Marcus had never noticed. The woman with the small children receives groceries from the man in apartment 3B every Thursday, Lyra noted during one of their morning observations from the window. But she pays him in vegetables from the garden she maintains on the roof. This is community resource sharing. "How do you see all this?" Marcus asked. "Practice. My people survive by understanding social structures. We watch, we listen, we learn who can be trusted and who might pose threats. You have these same instincts, but you have trained yourself not to use them." "War changes how you see people," Marcus said. "Everyone becomes a potential threat." "Yes, I understand this, but the war's over, Marcus. Now you must retrain yourself to see people as potential allies instead." The truth of this hit Marcus harder than he expected. He realized that he had been living in a constant state of low-level alertness, treating every human interaction as a possible source of danger rather than connection. "How do I do that?" he asked. "Start small. Learn your neighbors' names. Offer help when you see it is needed. Allow others to help you in return. Trust must be rebuilt gradually, like healing from an injury." That afternoon, Marcus found himself helping an elderly man carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs. The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Rodriguez, invited Marcus in for coffee and showed him photographs of his grandchildren. It was a small interaction, but it left Marcus feeling lighter than he had in months. "You are learning," Lyra observed when he returned to their apartment. "It's strange. I used to know how to do this. Before the war, I mean. I had friends, went to parties, dated occasionally. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be around people. The skill is still there. It simply needs practice." Lyra settled into her usual spot by the window. "This is why the king chose well when he paired us. My people excel at reading social dynamics, but we sometimes lack the patience for the slow building of trust that humans seem to prefer. You can teach me about human-style relationships while I help you remember how to form them. Marcus realized that his life had changed more in 2 weeks than it had in the previous 2 years. The apartment felt less like a hiding place and more like a home. He found himself looking forward to conversations with Lyra, to her observations about the world around them, to her gentle challenges to his assumptions about himself and others. But the real test came when Lyra announced that she needed to make contact with other members of her species living on Earth. "There are others?" Marcus asked, surprised. "A small community in the northern territories of your continent. Perhaps 24 families who serve as cultural liaisons and trade representatives. I should introduce myself and report on my new assignment." "Makes sense," Marcus said, though he felt a strange reluctance at the idea of Lyra leaving, even temporarily. "I would like you to accompany me," Lyra continued. "Meeting my people would help you understand my culture better, and I believe you would find their perspective on human society interesting." The journey north took them through landscapes Marcus had never seen, forests and mountains that reminded him why he had joined the military in the first place, to protect places of beauty and the people who called them home. Lyra seemed more relaxed as they traveled away from the urban environment, her movements becoming more fluid and natural. The Fenrigan settlement was hidden in a valley surrounded by dense woodland, invisible from the air and accessible only by footpaths that seemed designed to discourage casual visitors. The buildings blended seamlessly with the natural environment, constructed from local materials and designed to minimize their impact on the surrounding ecosystem. Lyra's people welcomed Marcus with courtesy, but obvious curiosity. They were all variations on Lyra's basic form, tall, lupine, graceful, but with different colorations and slight variations in build. Their leader, an elder named Korath, whose fur had gone silver with age, spoke to Marcus in English heavily accented, but perfectly understandable. "So you are the human soldier who impressed our king," Korath said, studying Marcus with pale blue eyes. "Lyra has told us much about you." "Nothing too embarrassing, I hope," Marcus replied, earning a rumbling sound that he realized was Fenrigan laughter. "She speaks of your kindness and your potential for growth. High praise from one of our seekers." Korath gestured toward a circle of logs arranged around a fire pit. "Sit. Let us learn about each other." The evening that followed opened Marcus's eyes to an entirely different way of thinking about community and relationships. The Fenrigans shared stories, food, and observations with an openness that was both refreshing and intimidating. They asked direct questions about his experiences, his fears, his hopes for the future. In return, they shared their own struggles with adapting to life on Earth, their efforts to maintain their cultural identity while building bridges with human communities. "We find humans fascinating," explained a younger Fenrigan named Veltar. "Your species has such capacity for both great kindness and terrible cruelty, sometimes within the same individual. It makes you unpredictable, but never boring. The challenge," added Korath, "is helping humans see beyond their immediate surroundings. Your people are often so focused on individual survival that they miss opportunities for collective growth." Marcus found himself defending humanity while simultaneously recognizing the truth in their observations. "We're not naturally pack animals like you. It takes more effort for us to build communities." "Yes," Lyra interjected. "But when humans do form strong communities, they can accomplish remarkable things. The diversity of human cultures and perspectives creates strength through different approaches to problems." The conversation continued late into the night, covering everything from galactic politics to child-rearing practices. Marcus realized that this was the first time since leaving the military that he had felt intellectually stimulated, challenged to think beyond his own narrow experiences. When they finally prepared to sleep, Korath pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "Lyra speaks truly when she says you have potential," the elder said, "but I sense you still carry wounds from your wars, emotional injuries that have not healed properly." Marcus nodded, unsure how to respond to such direct observation. "My people believe that healing requires both time and purpose. Lyra can provide you with purpose, the chance to help bridge the gap between our species. But the healing must come from within. You must choose to let the wounds close, rather than keeping them open as protection against further hurt." "How do I do that?" Marcus asked, the same question he had posed to Lyra weeks earlier. "By accepting that the war taught you to survive, but survival is not the same as living. Living requires risk, connection, the possibility of loss, but also the possibility of joy." As Marcus lay in the guest shelter that night, listening to the sounds of the forest around him, he thought about Korath's words. For 3 years he had been surviving, going through the motions of civilian life without truly engaging with it. Lyra's arrival had begun to change that, but the choice to fully embrace that change was still his to make. The crisis came 6 months after Lyra had entered Marcus's life, arriving in the form of an emergency broadcast that interrupted their morning routine. Marcus had been making coffee while Lyra practiced her English pronunciation by reading aloud from the local newspaper, a daily ritual that had become one of his favorite parts of each day. "Emergency alert," the wall screen announced in the mechanical voice reserved for official announcements. "All citizens are advised that a diplomatic incident is developing at the New Geneva spaceport. Unknown hostile vessels have taken control of the orbital traffic control station. Military response is being coordinated." Marcus set down his coffee cup, his mind automatically shifting into tactical mode. "That's 15 kilometers from here. If someone's taken the orbital station, they control all traffic in and out of the system." Lyra's ears had snapped to attention at the first mention of hostile vessels. "This is not a random attack. Someone has planned this very carefully." She moved to the window, her yellow eyes scanning the sky as if she could spot the threat from their apartment. The broadcast continued with updates that painted an increasingly serious picture. The attackers had disabled 3 orbital defense platforms before seizing the traffic control station. Several civilian ships had been destroyed when they failed to respond quickly enough to new traffic restrictions. Most ominously, the attackers were demanding the immediate surrender of all non-terrestrial residents currently on Earth. "They want the alien communities," Marcus said, understanding hitting him like a cold shock. "This is about species purification." Lyra turned from the window, her expression grim. "The Fenrigan settlement. My people are 3 hours away by ground transport, hidden but not fortified. If these attackers have orbital control, they can hunt down any alien communities that someone betrays or that they discover through surveillance." Marcus was already moving toward his bedroom, pulling out the secure communication device he had kept from his military service. "I need to contact my old unit commander. If this is what I think it is, the regular authorities won't be equipped to handle it." "What do you think it is?" Lyra asked, following him. "Supremacists. Human separatists who think Earth should be for humans only." Marcus activated the comm device, hoping his old military code still worked. "They've been growing bolder since the war ended, claiming that alien influences are weakening humanity. Taking orbital control gives them the power to hunt down any non-humans on the surface." The device crackled to life, and Marcus heard the familiar voice of Colonel Sarah Mitchell, his former commanding officer. "Marcus? What the hell are you doing on military frequencies?" "Sarah, I need intel on what's happening at the spaceport. Are we looking at domestic terrorists or something bigger?" "Bigger. Much bigger. We've identified at least 40 ships in the attacking force, all modified civilian vessels but heavily armed. They're calling themselves the Terra Liberation Front. Professional operation. Marcus, someone with serious resources is backing this." Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. "What's the military response?" "Complicated. The president doesn't want to start a shooting war in orbit that could damage civilian infrastructure. We're trying to negotiate, but these TLF bastards aren't interested in talking. They've given Earth's government 6 hours to begin voluntary repatriation of all alien residents. And after 6 hours, they start bombarding population centers with known alien communities. Marcus, why are you asking? Please tell me you're not thinking about playing hero again. Marcus looked at Lyra, who was listening to both sides of the conversation with growing alarm. I'm living with a Fenrigan cultural liaison, Sarah. She's under my protection. Shit. Marcus, listen to me carefully. Get her somewhere safe and keep your head down. This isn't a military operation you can solve with courage and good intentions. We're talking about orbital bombardment capabilities. What about evacuation? Getting the alien communities off-world? Blocked. They're not letting anything leave the surface. Any ship that tries gets vaporized. Marcus ended the call and found Lyra staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. You told her I was under your protection. You are. That's what companions do, right? Protect each other? Yes, but Marcus, you cannot fight an entire fleet by yourself. Even your heroic instincts have practical limits. Marcus began pulling equipment from his bedroom closet. His old combat gear, weapons he had kept despite regulations, emergency supplies that military training had taught him never to be without. I'm not going to fight a fleet. I'm going to get you and your people to safety. How? You heard your colonel. Nothing can leave the surface. Not from the spaceports, but there are other ways off-world if you know where to look. Marcus paused in his packing to look at Lyra directly. Do you trust me? With my life. But I will not let you sacrifice yourself for my people. Good! Because that's not the plan. The plan is for all of us to survive this. Marcus's idea was insane, dangerous, and technically illegal under at least 15 different interstellar treaties. It was also their only option. The abandoned mining station on Luna's far side had been shut down for 20 years. Its automated systems maintaining basic life support, but its location forgotten by most official records. Marcus knew about it because his unit had used it as a staging area during the war, launching covert operations from the moon's hidden face where Earth's surveillance systems couldn't detect their activities. If we can reach the lunar transport tunnel at Sector 7, Marcus explained as they drove toward the Fenrigan settlement, we can use the emergency pods to reach the station. From there, we can signal for help from outside the system. The tunnels are monitored, Lyra pointed out. The official ones are, but there's a maintenance access that connects to the old mining surveys. It's not on any current maps. They reached the Fenrigan settlement to find it in controlled chaos. Korath and the other elders had already begun evacuation procedures, but with 24 individuals, including children, moving quietly and quickly was proving challenging. The human military commander is correct, Korath told Marcus after hearing the full situation report. This is not a threat we can fight directly, but neither can we simply hide and hope they overlook us. We won't be hiding. We'll be getting you somewhere safe while Earth deals with the terrorists. A young Fenrigan named Asha Tar stepped forward, her dark fur bristling with anger. Why should we run from human extremists? My people are warriors too. Perhaps it is time to show these Terra Liberation fools what happens when they threaten non-humans. Because fighting them plays into their narrative, Marcus replied. They want to portray aliens as threats to humanity. Violence from your people, even in self-defense, gives them propaganda they can use to recruit more followers. Korath nodded slowly. The human speaks wisdom. Our strength is not in weapons, but in proving that cooperation between species benefits everyone. The journey to Sector 7 took 8 hours. Traveling by night through back roads and forest paths to avoid the surveillance drones that had begun patrolling major highways. Marcus led the group using skills he had hoped never to need again, moving 24 alien refugees across hostile territory while avoiding detection. Lyra proved invaluable during the trek. her enhanced senses alerting them to patrol movements long before human eyes could spot the danger. The other Fenrigans followed her lead without question, their natural pack instincts allowing them to move as a coordinated unit despite their mixed ages and physical capabilities. The maintenance access to the lunar tunnel was exactly where Marcus remembered it, hidden behind a false wall in what appeared to be an abandoned equipment shed. The tunnel itself was cramped and poorly ventilated, designed for emergency evacuation rather than comfortable travel. But it would get them to Luna without appearing on any official transportation logs. The pods only hold 4 people each, Marcus explained as they prepared for the journey. We'll need to make 6 trips, and I can only pilot 1 pod at a time. I can pilot, Ashitar volunteered. My people learn vehicle operation as part of our basic education. These aren't vehicles. They're barely controlled falling objects with basic life support. Then it is fortunate that Fenrigans have excellent reflexes. The first trip to the mining station nearly ended in disaster when automated security systems, dormant for decades, suddenly activated and began scanning their pod. Marcus managed to transmit his old military codes just as the station's defense grid prepared to fire on them. "Welcome back, Sergeant Chen," the station's AI announced as they docked. "Your clearance expired 18 years ago, but emergency protocols are still in effect." The mining station was a maze of tunnels and chambers carved directly into Luna's bedrock, its life support systems maintained by automated systems that had kept functioning long after the human staff departed. It would serve as a temporary refuge, but Marcus knew they couldn't stay hidden indefinitely. It took 12 hours to ferry all the Fenrigans to the station, with Marcus and Ashitar taking turns piloting the emergency pods through increasingly dangerous orbital space. The Terra Liberation Front had begun expanding their search patterns, and several times they had to wait in the tunnel while hostile ships passed overhead. On the final trip, carrying Korath and 2 of the youngest Fenrigans, their luck ran out. A TLF patrol spotted their pod just as they reached the lunar surface, and Marcus found himself in a desperate chase through the asteroid field that surrounded Luna's far side. "Can this vessel fight?" Korath asked calmly as plasma bolts began impacting the pod's shields. "It's an emergency transport. Fighting wasn't part of the design specifications. Then we must be clever instead of strong." Marcus pushed the pod through a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible in atmospheric flight, using Luna's weak gravity field and the asteroid cover to break the pursuit's target lock. When the TLF ship finally gave up and returned to its patrol route, Marcus realized his hands were shaking from adrenaline. "You fly well for someone who claims not to be a hero," Korath observed. "I'm just stubborn. There's a difference." At the mining station, Marcus used the long-range communication array to contact Colonel Mitchell with their location and status. The response was immediate and encouraging. A joint human-Alterran task force was already en route to Earth, having been alerted to the TLF threat by King Zephyros himself. "Seems your alien friends have more political influence than the terrorists expected," Colonel Mitchell reported. "The king is not happy about threats to beings under his protection, and he's bringing enough firepower to resolve this situation permanently." "How long until they arrive?" 18 hours. "Can you keep your people safe until then?" Marcus looked around at the Fenrigans, who had adapted to their underground refuge with typical efficiency. The younger ones were exploring the tunnels with curiosity rather than fear, while the adults had organized sleeping areas and food distribution with quiet competence. Lyra was working with the station's computer systems, updating the life support settings to accommodate their specific atmospheric needs. "We'll be fine," Marcus told Colonel Mitchell. "These people are survivors." The liberation of Earth happened with surprising swiftness once King Zephyros's fleet arrived. The Terra Liberation Front, faced with actual military opposition instead of helpless civilians, proved less committed to their cause than their rhetoric suggested. Most surrendered without firing a shot, once it became clear they were outgunned and outnumbered. Marcus watched the final cleanup operations from the mining station's observation deck, Lyra standing beside him as TLF ships were escorted to orbital detention facilities. The entire crisis had lasted less than 48 hours, but it had changed something fundamental in his understanding of his place in the galaxy. "You saved my people," Lyra said quietly. "We saved them, all of us together." "Yes. But you were the one who knew how to lead when leadership was needed. You were the one who remembered that courage is not about fighting impossible battles, but about finding ways to protect what matters." Marcus thought about the past months, the gradual transformation from isolated veteran to someone capable of taking responsibility for others again. "I couldn't have done any of this alone. The old Marcus, the one who lived in that apartment and avoided his neighbors, he would have hidden and hoped someone else dealt with the problem." "Perhaps. But I think you underestimate who you were before I arrived. The potential was always there. I simply helped you remember it." King Zephyros visited the mining station personally to thank Marcus and meet the Fenrigans who had been under threat. The king seemed genuinely pleased to see that his gift of a companion had resulted in something larger than either he or Marcus had originally envisioned. "You have proven something important here," the king told Marcus during their private conversation. "Not just about human courage, which was never in doubt, but about the potential for true partnership between our species. You and Lyra have become more than companions. You have become proof that our different strengths complement each other." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "That depends on what you want to happen. Earth will need new protocols for protecting its alien residents, and the galactic community will want assurance that such incidents cannot occur again. Someone with your experience in both military operations and interspecies relations would be valuable in developing those protocols." The offer was tempting. A chance to use his skills for something meaningful again, to be part of building a better future, rather than simply surviving in the present. But the decision wasn't his alone to make. "I need to talk to Lyra," Marcus said. That conversation took place on the journey back to Earth, in the comfortable cabin of a royal transport that made their earlier emergency pod trips seem even more desperate in hindsight. "The king is offering us a job," Marcus told Lyra. "Working together on interspecies security and relations, it would mean travel, new challenges, probably more dangerous situations." "And more opportunities to help people," Lyra added. "Both human and non-human." "Yes, but it would also mean giving up any chance of a quiet, peaceful life. No more mornings reading the newspaper together in our small apartment." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her yellow eyes thoughtful. "Marcus, do you remember what you told Mrs. Patterson about why you saved those people on Kepler 442b? "I said I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd left them behind." "Exactly. You did not choose the heroic path because it was glorious or rewarding. You chose it because it was the only choice your nature would allow you to make." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "This is the same type of choice. Can you live with yourself, knowing that other communities might face what mine faced, while you sit safely in your apartment reading newspapers?" Marcus already knew the answer, had known it from the moment the king made his offer. "No, I can't." "Then we accept the king's offer. Together." "Together," Marcus agreed. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the briefing room of the newest galactic security facility on Earth, addressing a mixed group of human and alien security personnel. The facility itself was a testament to interspecies cooperation, designed by Alteran architects, built by human engineers, and staffed by representatives from 12 different species. Lyra sat in the front row of the briefing room, her official title now Cultural Liaison and Tactical Advisor, though Marcus thought of her as simply his partner. Around the room, other human-alien teams were taking notes, preparing for their own assignments to protect the growing number of mixed communities throughout human space. The key to preventing future incidents like the Terra Liberation Front, Marcus told his audience, is not military strength alone, though that remains important. The key is building genuine connections between communities before crises develop. People don't attack neighbors they know personally. After the briefing, Marcus and Lyra walked through the facility's main corridor, past offices where humans and aliens worked side by side on problems that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. Through the large windows, Marcus could see the city of New Geneva spread out below, its skyline now dotted with architectural styles that reflected the diversity of its inhabitants. "Do you miss it?" Lyra asked as they paused at one of the windows. "The quiet life?" Marcus considered the question seriously. He thought about his old apartment, still maintained though rarely occupied now. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, who had become an enthusiastic advocate for alien rights after spending time with Lyra. He thought about the simple routines that had once defined his days. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I don't miss who I was then. That version of me was just surviving." "And now?" Marcus looked at Lyra, then at the bustling facility around them, then at the city beyond, where dozens of species were building a future together, despite all the challenges and setbacks along the way. "Now I'm living, thanks to a gift from a wise king and a patient companion who taught me how to be part of something larger than myself." Lyra's laugh was like wind chimes, musical and joyful. "The king chose well when he decided to pair a stubborn human soldier with an equally stubborn Fenrigan seeker." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, watching as a group of human and Corvin children played together in the facility's garden below. He did. Their comm units chimed simultaneously with an incoming assignment notification, another crisis brewing somewhere in the outer systems, another community that needed protection, another chance to prove that cooperation between species was not just possible, but powerful. Marcus and Lyra exchanged a look of understanding. They had work to do. Together they headed for the hangar bay where their ship was waiting, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. The quiet apartment and peaceful mornings would be there when they needed rest, but for now, the galaxy needed what they had learned to offer each other: partnership, understanding, and the courage to fight for what was right.